Hello, so this is the fourth and final session for the topic on personalization and configuring the display of data within Applaud. This final section is a continuation of the list views and concerns further configuration of how you configure the behavior when a user is adding a new record or updating an existing record, so controlling which fields people can update and so on, and also talking about the control of the ability to delete records. So edit. Now, first of all, we'll start with the view function. So we've been looking at the view function a lot. This view function controls the module, the layout with its list or form. We've been looking at what we've called the view formula name up to now. You've probably noticed there's an extra parameter called the p-edit formula name, and basically the behavior of edit is also controlled by a fast formula, a different fast formula. We usually have edit in the title. Okay, so we've probably used or seen the edit window by now. But basically, when you have a view that supports edit, you've almost got like two panels. You've got the view only panel, the detail pop-up panel that has an edit button at the top if you're allowed to update. So that's read only. And when you press up edit, it flips over to a different region that's got the ability to change data or enter new data. We call that the edit view. So we have a read only view with a formula and an edit view with a second formula. Okay, so you're almost like swapping between them back and forth as you change or don't change. So this is the absence one we've looked at before. We looked at this formula in a previous session. At the end of the formula, we have the controls on whether you can edit or delete a particular row. And in the case of absences, when you add a new row or when you update a row, the behavior there is controlled by this formula here, which has been specified on the view function. Just a small note about mobile. A lot of you will be working with Applaud because of the mobile functionality. And we've of course been looking at desktop all the time. It's just worth remembering again that all the configuration for Applaud is done within the business suite, within Oracle. But just notice the size of these panels, and actually they're designed to be the same sort of size that will fit nicely on a smartphone. It's pretty much how the edit works on a smartphone. When you press the edit button, the view flips to view something like this, where you have the ability to enter or update data, and the same configuration you're doing within the view formula or the edit formula will also be reflected when you come to use it on smartphone. Same for tablet. So what can you do within edit? Okay, so this is starts to get quite similar to what you can do within personalization within Oracle OAF screens. So standard things you expect. You should be able to hide a field that we show, or you can show a field that's not currently being displayed. Flex fields are a very common thing you want to show. You can make a field read only, so it's displayed, but you can't change it. You can change the label. It's like the prompt. You can actually set the value of a field as well. There's certain examples that are very useful for that. A typical example is just defaulting a value, of course. Actually, with flex fields, we do actually pick up the default values, but there are occasionally times within other processes where you just want to set the value immediately for the user, whether that's based on a previous field that they've entered or coming in for the first time. That's possible to do too. This fifth point is very, very important because it's a common requirement that customers have, and it does trip up consultants sometimes. So if you know your flex fields very well, you'll know of a construct called $flex $. So a $sign, then flex, then $, and if you define flex field segments, excuse me, with that construct in it, it means that field 1 is dependent on field 2, or field 2 is dependent on field 1. Essentially, when you use it when the value you enter in one field affects the behavior of the second field. So if you've got dependencies between two segments on a flex field, you often have that sort of thing. And there's an example there. Show field 7 if you choose X in field 2. So the user would go down, they'd select X or whatever, it's field 2, and then suddenly field 7 would pop up. So the display of field 7 would be dependent on the value in field 2. Now the way we handle that, I'll go into some detail later, and we'll also see this a lot when we do the session on extra information types and special information types. But it's possible to code this in. So you basically define field 2 to be a driving field or a control field. If field 2 is changed, you kind of refresh the screen based on the value that's been set in field 2, and then behavior will change. Now, if you're going through the formula, you'll see an attribute called refresh on change. If you see something called refresh on change, it means that when that field is altered, the whole screen is going to refresh and redisplay based on the new value in that field. We'll see a couple of examples of that later. Okay, you can add a tip for each field, a tip text. That can be HTML tip text, so that tip can include links and URLs. You can make a field mandatory. We can't beat Oracle. That's what I always say. You can't beat Oracle. We can't beat the Oracle APIs. Okay, you can't override them with our code. But what you can do is make an optional field conditionally mandatory in our screens, even if the segment isn't mandatory in Oracle. That's the most common thing. But if a field is mandatory in Oracle, you won't be able to make it not mandatory. You can't override Oracle behavior. All you can do is just make our validation a little bit tighter. You can also change the value set on the formula. And when you'd want to do this is if you want to change the values in a list of values. If you want to change the LOV contents, for example, restrict absence types down to a particular subset, you create a different value set, and then you swap out the default value set with your value set. That's possible as well. A lot of customers, consultants do that. So at this basic, it's really simple. Hide or show fields. As you get more experienced with Applaud, you can do some very nice tailoring of the edit panel to make your data entry for your users much easier. And just remember that this also works on mobile as well, so a very powerful framework to control data entry. This is what a edit fast formula looks like. Typically they're actually a lot shorter than the view formula. But basically what you have is for each field, like segment 1, segment 2, absence type, absence reason, and so on, you have a set of what we call attributes, and those attributes can be set to whatever we need. So for example, an attribute might be visible, which is basically segment 2. This is shown here on screen. Segment 2 is visible is false. That means that segment 2 can't be seen. Segment 2 description is help text that shows underneath the field. So if that's set, it shows you that text on the screen. Okay, here's another one here. Segment 2 required is true. So that can be true or false. That just means that segment 2, in this case, is a mandatory field. So basically each field that's available to enter has a set of attributes: visible, description, required, value, list provider is the value set, max chars, how many characters you can get in, that sort of thing. And you can set those within the edit formula. Now by default you don't have to set any of them if you don't want to, and if you don't want to, that's fine. We'll use our default behavior and you don't have to write a formula at all, which is quite nice. But you do have to write the formula if you want to change the default behavior of our solution. I'm just going to get on to a little bit of an advanced topic, but I basically want to, oops, my calendar's changed. I basically want to talk about approvals quickly, and this is the best place to raise that topic. So we're just going to go onto a very few quick slides about approval chains AME rules. So back to this edit data function here. This edit function, sorry, the view function. In here, we've got a number of parameters for formula name, edit formula name. We've covered those. There's also this data function, extremely important parameter. This you see this p data function. In here, we've got something called xxx as data LOA. Now, what that is doing is that is pointing to another function, so another menu function, effectively, with that name there. And that we call the data function. And what that specifies, amongst other things, are the approval rules that are going to be called when you press save. Now, we're going to be talking about the data function a lot more in the session on RBAC. So at this point, we're going to kind of skim over some of the details of why it's there. But for the purposes of the edit and add session now, this is the place where you specify your approval rules. So just to recap that, data function is another function. So if you go into the function screen, query this back, you'll see something like this. So I'm going to go through just what these parameters are, because some of these we don't actually talk about in the training course, but there's a couple of important ones on here. So first of all, the P implementation, that is a PL/SQL package, and that's basically what we call when you press save. Now, if you're really technical and you really are ambitious, then you could potentially overwrite this package and call your own PL/SQL package. All it is a PL/SQL package. But we don't advise it, and we don't give any training or document how that's done, because that is very technical. It could potentially break the code, and we wouldn't support that if you did it. But if you're the kind of technical consultant that loves to try new things out, then theoretically it's possible to override this and swap this with a PL/SQL package of your own. The view XML, this again is an advanced some advanced techniques here. The view XML controls all the fields that are available in the edit window. So if you go and find that XML file on a database and you have a look at it, you'll see an XML document that describes all the different fields and the order of the fields as well. Theoretically, you can override this and customize it. Again, we don't document it, and we don't promote it too much, because it's technical work and you can break the screen if you try it. So we advise you never change these, but for very highly technical people, then it's possible to do so. Okay, the reason I'm showing you this at this point in the course is because we have this p called from parameter here. That p called from must point at your employee self-service function that you currently use for, in this case, absences, or whatever it is, whether it's an EIT function, personal information change, whatever, qualifications, whatever. What will happen is when we press save, we will look at this function here, and we will call the workflow and AME rules that are attached to that function. So it's very important you change this. So this P called from, it's very important if you have your own workflows or you have your own AME rules. It's very important that you check this P called from and swap it out to your specific function. It's got to be on the employee self-service menu. It's got to be employee self-service function. So even if you're configuring a transaction that will be done by managers on their employees, you still use the employee self-service function, because that specifies the workflow that is called to submit that transaction. You have to do this even if your process doesn't have a workflow, or I should say doesn't have approvals. Every process in self-service will have a workflow. Not all of them have approvals, but they all call workflows, and we use that. Okay, so really important. It's an easy step for consultants to forget to change this parameter. Now, what happens after the fast formula is run? So when creator updated delete, what happens when you press save is the Oracle API is fired. What we do when we press save on the transaction is we run the API in validate mode. And by running the API in validate mode, it basically means that we are testing that the data has been entered, conforms to all server-side business rules, and most importantly here, we call your user hooks if you have any. All right, so when you press save, it's going to call the API. By calling the API from Oracle, we will run any user hooks that you have created for your process. And if those user hooks raise any errors, those errors will be shown on screen at the top. Once we've actually saved it, we'll be creating a row on HAR API transactions. So if you've written any validation against HR API transactions, we will be you'll be able to validate against that data. So after we successfully validate the API, what we do now is we decide who are the approvers, so you can check that. And what we do is we basically run AME against the function that you specified in P call from, and we'll determine the approvers for you. There's absolutely no additional configuration you need to do in AME. So if you've done all your approval setup already for self-service, you're done. You just have to change that function parameter on our data function. We inherit everything else. Okay, so just to be clear, there's absolutely no change of, you don't need to create new workflows, you don't need to create new AME rules. We use exactly what you have configured already. And that includes custom workflows too. So if you've created custom workflows, we'll call custom workflows. Those custom workflows will do whatever they do already. They could call a concurrent program, they could generate a document, whatever. They will still fire in the normal way. Okay, so this is the last exercise of this suite on personalization. This one should take around 15 minutes. Normal process. I'm going to pause the training for about 20 seconds or so, give you time in your own time to do the exercise as you see fit, and then when you reconvene the recorded training, I will go through the answers to this particular exercise. Good luck. All right. Good. If you got through this particular exercise, you're doing well. You've probably covered a lot of what the day-to-day work is involved in configuring Applaud, is configuring formula. So this first suite of exercises are the most important to understand. Let's go through this particular one. Find the edit formula for absence edit. What is its name? Okay, well, you know where we're going to start, of course. I could go directly and have a guess in the formula screen, but I always prefer to go and look at registered views menu first to go through and just make sure that I've got the right formula in play. So let's do that. Okay, so functional administrator. And we're into menus, into reg, views. Okay, so we're into absence again. Leave for absence. And we're into absence detail. Okay, so here we've got a bunch of stuff. Here's the module layout type, is the data function. We'll look at that a little bit more tomorrow. But here we have the edit name, edit formula name. Okay, so if I go back and I look at the contents of that formula. Okay, so here we are. Here's the edit formula for absence. Much longer than actually most of our edit formula. Most of our edit formula are smaller than this one, but absence has a few variations for different requirements, so it's a bit longer. Okay, what are the attributes for absence hours that are set by this formula, and what do you think these achieve? So I think it might be worth, just before I do that, bringing up Applaud in a different window so we can actually see the behavior on the screen. Okay, so absence hours. So let's have a look down here for absence hours. Okay, so I'm just use the find at the top left here. So absence hours to start with is false. So that's the first thing. When we go into Employee Centre and add a new absence, you should be seeing that the absence hours does not come up. Let's see if that's true. There we go, we've only actually got one screen showing there, or one field showing there. And then what happens, so if hours or days equals H, then absence hours is visible, enabled, and also has a value. So basically what we're saying is, there's some logic above this to say, is the absence type an hours-based absence type or a days-based absence type? If it's hours-based absence type, then we're going to show this field, absence hours. It's going to show as true. It's going to be read-only. It's going to show us this is false. And actually it's going to be set to the value of whatever calculated duration is. In this particular example, we actually do call your absence duration business group fast formula. If you've written an absence duration fast formula, that will be called and the value will be set. Now if you wanted the user to be able to overwrite that calculated duration, you would set that to true, and what would happen then is it would show the correct duration as the formula calculates it, but it would allow the user to overwrite it. Okay, so those are the attributes for absence hours. If I see this in here, I'm just trying to think if we've got an example. I'm not sure we have actually, but let's just choose one at random. Choose FMLA. Oh yeah, here we go. So FMLA is an hours-based absence. I don't know if you noticed, but duration wasn't showing before, and now it is showing. So just let me just do that quickly again to demonstrate that. So if we choose FMLA, you can see underneath the end time there's no absence hours, it's going onto the flex fields. So if I choose, let's do it again, choose a different date. Okay, so what it's done is it's used the absence calculation formula, that's your one. I can't click in there, I can't change it because it's read only, it's decided to show it. Okay, so nice technique there to kind of keep the UI clean and only show fields when you're able to. Again, this will work in mobile as well, it'll work in the same way. Number 3, what happens when the absence type contains the string sick? Okay, so hopefully you saw as you went down, there's a little bit of logic in here where we're looking at the absence type. Has it got sick in it, or has it got the absence category to S? And if it has, then what we're doing is we're setting the attachments visible to true and required, and we're changing the label on it to show the contents of that message. Alright, so attachments is something that is quite commonly requested by customers to make these things mandatory or conditionally required. You can do that. So in this case, what we're saying is the attachments are mandatory to enter if you're entering a type of sickness. So for example, a medical certificate, doctor's note, that sort of thing. But if you're not entering a sickness, maybe a holiday or something like that, then the attachments are not required. very, very useful. We've got a lot of customers that use this a lot, where they have restrictions over particularly sickness absences, and because you can't do this in standard self-service, it's often down to the HR administrator to check if the attachment's been uploaded and reject the absence if it has not. But in our case, what we can do is, if I just scroll down a minute and see at the bottom of this box, you see at the bottom here, the last field is comments to approver. If I change this to sick, you've got sick evidence has appeared. That's the content of that message. You've got this little star there that says it's mandatory, so I can't submit this without adding an attachment. And if I press save, it says please enter sick evidence there. And then I would have to upload an attachment of some nature before I could continue and submit that sickness. Okay, really, really useful to be able to do that on attachments, and that works across all processes that support attachments, not just absence. When would you see the start time and end time fields? Okay, so you can see start time here and end time here. Let's just do a quick start time. I think is it? There's a date, time start. Time start. Okay, so interesting. We've got this refresh on change attribute here. I'll talk about that in a second a bit more. So time start, to start with, the time start is and time end is visible, is false, visible false, so you can't see it. So we are showing, this logic is what I was looking for. You're really looking for the time start visible flags to be set, and you can see that it's set. We show the time start if the absence type is an hours-based absence type. If it's not an hours-based absence type, then in this case we are not showing the start time. All right. So again, just trying to remember if we've got an example of this on here. I think most of our absences are based in hours on this particular setup, so maybe not the best example, to be honest. Yeah, I don't think we've got any examples actually to show you what it looks like. Oh, here we go, personal time. So personal day time is a days-based absence. So in this particular example, customer doesn't want the hours to show, sorry, the time to show. This is only going to be recorded in days. There's no component of time. So we are not showing the time fields. Whereas if I go to something like vacation, where we are recording in hours, we are now showing the hours coming back. So using these sorts of techniques, you can really make the edit screen a lot more dynamic, just exposing the fields that the user needs to see rather than everything at once. Makes the UI a lot cleaner. If the user mistakenly enters an end date that's before the start date, what happens? Okay, so we'll try that out and see it in the screen first of all. So let's try and put a vacation in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a vacation in. It starts on the 7th and it's going to end on the 5th. Obviously can't happen, or shouldn't happen. Now when you press save, Oracle would throw that out, okay, and so that's fine. There's no danger of that ever going through. But in this case, what we're doing is we're actually in the UI, as soon as you've entered the field, we're putting a bit of a context-sensitive message into the screen saying the end is before the start. So the user doesn't have to go all the way and press save before they realize they've made a mistake. It's on the screen right in front of them, right from the word go. And if we look at the formula that achieves that, it's here. It's saying if date end value is less than date start value. Notice we've got this underscore in, by the way. This underscore in means this is the value that's in the field at the time the formula is running. If you just said date end value, that's the value you're setting. So that's the value you change potentially and set to something else. So the one that's coming in is non-changeable. That's the value in the field when the formula runs, and the date end value without the in is what you can set it to. But anyway, in this case, the value in the end date is smaller than the value in the start date, and therefore what we're showing is this particular message underneath. So we've got a message called XXAS abs ed, whatever that is, and then we're also doing a bit of HTML formatting, colouring in red, and that's what you see there. We have quite a few customers that actually quite like this feature and put different sort of tip text based on the absence type. Quite common to see. I've seen 2 or 3 customers put a link to policy pages based on the absence type. So if you choose vacation, or maybe sickness, so it's for sickness policy rules, click here, because you can do that context sensitive display. You can say something like, if absence type equals sick, then display this message. Else, if absence type equals maternity, then show this message, and each message will could link off to a different URL page to policy documents. It's quite a nice way to do things. But anyway, in terms of that one, we've got that little bit of logic. It's displaying text on screen. When the user selects absence type, the screen renders again showing other fields. What is the setting in the FF that achieves this? Okay. So what I mean by this is, when we go down here and select, say, sick, you'll see it spinning at the top, and it renders again. This is more obvious when I actually come in and create a new record. Look, we've got no fields at all except absence type. I'm choosing absence type, I choose sick, it's spinning down, it's displaying. So let's talk about refresh on change a little bit, because that's the kicker here. So we've got at the top here, absence type ID refresh on change equals true. So what that means is whenever that field changes, what it's going to do, it's going to refresh, and all that means in fast formula terms, it's going to run this formula again, but this time using whatever values is being set within that field. Okay. And in this case, the first time you run through it, absence type will be empty. Second time you run through it with absence type set, it's going to have a value. So we say has absence type equals yes. And then we go through this big bit of logic here. If has absence type equals yes, then you start setting visible to all those fields, and they show up. So in terms of how this works in practice, let's just go through that a little bit more slowly. So I'm pressing add. Right, it's running the fast formula now. See it spin? It went very quickly. I'll just do it again. Watch what happens when I press the add button. It's spinning, 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 spinning. Okay, so when it's spinning, it's evaluating this formula. All the fields are blank at this point. Okay, nothing in any of the fields. But we have got some of these fields set to refresh on change. So I'm going to change the absence type. Now, at this point, it knows, the UI knows that because of this value here, that when I change the absence type, it's going to re-evaluate the fast formula. So I choose, spin, spin, spin. This time, what it's doing, it's going through this formula again, but this time it knows absence type equals sick. So amongst other things, it's going into here, because it says if absence type like sick or yes, this time this evaluates to true. And therefore it runs these 3 lines of code as well. Okay, and at the bottom you've got sick evidence showing. So this is how you start to build up dependencies between fields quite nicely. If you look at some other fields that have refresh on change set, so we've got, for example, date start, I think. So we've got date start and date end refresh on change. Okay, so it knows that when I change the start date, it's going to refresh it. So let's do that and see. Here it goes. It's off and running. Should only take a second. It's refreshed it. Nothing is going to happen here. Now I'm going to do the end date. This again has got a refresh on change on it. See over here, date end refresh on change. So I know that when I press this, it's going to reevaluate the fast formula. It's running, 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 running. This time, we have a start date and end date, and there's some logic there to show the duration. So if the start and end date are set, there's a duration, calculate it, show it. Say I were to update that, again, refresh on change, click it, evaluate, 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 running the fast formula edit. This time we've had a condition met in the fast formula where the end date is earlier than the start date. Alright, very useful. So this refresh on change is a nice handy thing to understand. Again, gets quite important when we get onto extra information types, special information types. Last question. The client wants to share a link to their sickness absence policy intranet page and the user selects sickness absence type. How would you achieve this? Or if they wanted to show a different URL for maternity. Kind of covered this already. You would have something like this. Just go into update here. So this is based on a real life requirement I've seen from a number of customers where you want a URL to the sickness policy page. You would have something like attachments description is equal to, I don't know, HTTP mypolicypage.com. Of course, you'd write this in HTML, but it'd be something like, please go here for sickness policy. Okay, and obviously, you know, you'd write the HTML properly. That's not been written properly. Now, if you wanted to do something for maternity that was different, you'd come in here and you'd say, else if upper absence type like equals maternity, then that shouldn't be attachments description, it should be absence type. Then absence type description is equal to please go here for maternity policy, and that'll be a different URL, mymaternity.page.com, whatever. So you can tell that I'm not a web coder. I prefer PL SQL. Okay, so really quite interesting stuff that you can do in these edit formulas, and they're worth spending the time on. Definitely clients like all this sort of stuff where you're really personalizing the experience for their users without actually a great deal of effort. I suppose I should just circle back quickly, because I felt I went through on the previous session about the edit and update a little bit fast. I haven't covered that in too much detail, but just going back to the ability to set edit and update and delete, I should say, sorry. See in here we've got hard-coded values in the view formula. So this is the view formula we're looking at now. And in there we've got update allowed equals yes and delete allowed equals no. Now what happens is that when I just press this refresh here, what happens now is you see where it's spinning? It's evaluating the view formula for every row in the list that's going to come back. The longer the list, the longer that'll take. And when I press on a particular value, again it's spinning up here, and it's determining whether I should be able to edit or delete that particular row. Okay, so, and it's using the logic from this fast formula here to determine that edit. Now you can see here I've done a hard-coded yes or no, but you could do things like if absence start date is less than current date, sysdate, then update allowed equals no, or delete allowed equals no. Or you could say something like if absence type equals sickness and absence end date is in the past, then update allowed equals no, delete allowed equals no. You could have something like if absence type equals vacation and start date is greater than sysdate, then update allowed equals yes and delete allowed equals yes. So the ability to control update and delete, and it's at the row level, remember. This formula is running every time each one of these rows comes back. And you can evaluate the update and delete permissions against every single row using whatever logic you'd like to write within fast formula. Very, very powerful controls that you've got, and much easier to do those sorts of requirements than it is in standard Oracle. We'll talk about how to configure a display of the add button in a later session. Good, that is the end of the first suite of sessions that's on personalization. And as I said earlier, configuring fast formula for these sorts of requirements is definitely the most common thing that you will do during an Applaud implementation. So hopefully that's been clear. It's given you some guidance on things to look at and how to navigate around our fast formula. The next set of sessions will be on roles-based access control, security, a tough part of the learning, but very good to understand the security side as well. So Suite 2 will be on roles-based access control. But for now, that's the end of Suite 1. Hope that was useful to you. Thanks very much.